Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I'm Ross Aiken. I'm old who.
I don't want to boast, but we might be somewhere in London.
And I'm Jason Miller. I am the master of Earth.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go and have a look.
And we're here to talk Dalek Invasion of Earth. The second Dalek story and the second story in season 2. I love it how in some doctors, Gallifrey's Most Wanted has gone through multiple seasons. And we're only in the first guy, we're only 2 stories into the second season. Just because how many damn stories are in each one.
And the kicker is, this was not even made for the second season. This was made as part of the first season. It was the final story made in production season 1. So in a sense, you are still in the very first Hartnell season, even while you finish the entire TV era of 2 or 3 other Doctors.
I know. It's so many. So they basically did 2 stories in the pilot was a separate. So was it all one block that went over a year?
Yeah, it was 52 continuous weeks in production, and that's why Hartnell misses 2 weeks in Keys of Marinus, and that's why Ian and Barbara and Susan each get 2-week vacations, because that was the only vacation they got for the entire year.
I thought it was always 52 from Unearthly Child to the end of Reign of Terror, but it's 52 when you get to the end of this one.
They held over. They needed a break, so they held over Planet of Giants, and they held over Dalek Invasion of Earth. And bear in mind, Planet of Giants was made in studio as a 4-parter. They spent 4 weeks of their lives in studio, and it was decided that was going to be the season 2 premiere rather than part of season 1. They chopped 3 and 4 in half because they both had nothing happening. So
they have anything. Yeah, never mind. I get in trouble for bashing them.
They took 2 weeks in studio and turned it into 1 episode, and then most people didn't even realize that material was missing until Gary Russell decided to reanimate it for the DVD release. So from the pilot to Dalek Invasion of Earth Part 6, that was every single week in Lime Grove D for a little more than a year.
Wow, that's an awful lot. I mean, and even like when I go back and watch like Star Trek, original show, it's like almost 30. It's 30 episodes in the first year. And I went, that's an awful lot for an American television show, which nowadays, it used to be standard 25, half the year. You know, because we didn't have new TV in the summer. You know what I mean? We'd have specials, but they'd run reruns to give everybody a vacation. We didn't care. We only had 3 channels, most places. But it was like 25. And that didn't even die out until started dying when HBO started making TV, and then the writer's strike, and most seasons, you know, in American TV it's 20 for a full-length show. At most it's 20.
Yeah, the streaming services gives you more money and a better look, but fewer episodes. But that's a fairly recent development.
Sopranos, I think that's the last 10 or 15 years. It's a slow build. The last writer's strike did some of it too, because, you know, people were going to AMC and other cable channels and going, I'll do a show for you, but we're only doing 10. Like HBO, you know, like Sopranos, stuff like that. They were all using the 10. And I think it works better. I think you get a better product. You don't end up with schlock. I mean, even shows I love, there's an episode every now and then you're going, everybody was on vacation. This thing's terrible. Or it's a bad next-gen bottle episode. It's like, you know, go out in the sun, please. But
Sopranos was 13 a season. Doctor Who started off, the new series is 13. Now they're down to 10. Yeah, Yellow Jackets season 2 is only 9 episodes, which is not nearly enough.
Yeah, and some of the Marvel, because they're 6, and the Star Wars stuff, they're 6. They're 6 to 8, depending on what the story is. I just need the number, and their times are all over the place. I mean, I watched an episode of one of the Amanda Lawrence was like under 30 minutes, because that's because they can play with it. But here, man, this was an assembly line. This is and they're still shooting it like a 3-camera play, because that's there are years of that left. And rewatching this one, it amazes me, because we haven't even talked about this one. So I'm going to now plug in where the synopsis should go. Okay.
The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Serial K. Writer, Terry Nation. Director, Richard Martin. Script editor, David Whitaker. Producers, Verity Lambert, Mervyn Pinfield. Originally aired November 21st, 1964 to December 26, 1964. The scene is London, 2167. The Daleks have invaded Earth, making many thousands of inhabitants into Robomen, human Dalek servants, by clamping metal control helmets to their heads. Other slaves have been shipped to Bedfordshire, where the Daleks have a vast mining complex. They have discovered a fissure in the Earth's inner shell, through which they aim to remove the planet's core and replace it with a magnetic power system, so they can pilot Earth anywhere in the universe. The Doctor and Ian are captured by the Robomen and taken to the Dalek Supreme, the Black Dalek, who tries to change the Doctor into a Roboman, strapping him into an operating table in the robotizer chamber of a Dalek flying saucer parked at Chelsea Heliport. The rest of the TARDIS crew escape from London and head for the mining fields, where Ian confronts a Slither, the Dalek's man-eating pet. Susan and a freedom fighter named David Campbell manage to gain entry to the complex and destroy the Dalek's radio network. No longer under the Daleks' control, the Roboman and the slaves are encouraged by the Doctor to rise against their inhuman masters. The bomb is detonated, which destroys the Daleks and their craft. The Earth is now safe, and Susan has fallen in love with David Campbell, decides to stay behind. With the departure of Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, the TARDIS crew changes for the first time. Another great synopsis from the Doctor Who Program Guide, the complete guide to every Doctor Who story by Jean-Marc Léofficer. It's still available, folk. It's been in print for 40-some years. Get a copy.
But this one doesn't look, we've just gone on just randomly talking about how much they did in a year. That's a lot of TV. That's a lot. And if this was the last one they filmed in that year, that says a lot. Because I like this one a great deal. This is one I've watched, I was telling Jason, maybe too many times. I've watched this one a lot.
This may be, pound for pound, the best Hartnell serial. So Hartnell did, I think, 26 serials encompassing 132 broadcast episodes. And if you want to include the now reconstructed parts 3 and 4 of Planet of Giants, that's one more. If you want to include the unaired pilot, that's 134. Of the serials he did, I think pound for pound, this is the best produced, the best written. Dalek Master Plan, there's a couple of episodes out of the 12 where your attention flags a little bit.
Yeah.
Massacre, I think, is possibly Doctor Who's best script ever, but the Doctor is barely in it.
Yeah. But that's what makes that one so good. I mean, because it is you're trying something new and letting your lead actor catch his breath by cleansing his palate of playing the Doctor. I think it's great. That's one of the ones that and Marco Polo are always the ones I want to be found.
Yeah. What was I going to say? The Hartnell era is my favorite, even after all this time, because of the variety and diversity, because you never know what you're going to get. Every serial is completely different in tone and genre to the one before. Once I finish my novelizations podcast, probably in about 18 months, I want to do a weekly Hartnell podcast covering his entire run, pilot through 10th Planet, just because everything changes so much from serial to serial. So the plan is to have a different guest every 4 weeks, and that would mean some guests overlap different serials, but the tone shift from Marco Polo to Keys of Marinus, the tone shift from Space Museum to The Chase, the tone shift from the Massacre to the Ark, you don't get that tone shift really anywhere else in Doctor Who outside of the 1960s.
No. Once you get to that last season of his, you get some hints of what it's going to look like with the War Machines, and then with Troughton, after the Highlanders, you don't ever have any real true historicals anymore. It becomes the base under siege, the alien. It becomes a lot of the stuff that we're going to see in the future, and Troughton makes a big enough change between him and Hartnell that there's very little of Hartnell in future Doctors. Every once in a while, I think Davison pulls upon him. I think Capaldi pulls upon him more than others, you know, but more of Pat's in everybody than after that. That kind of, there's something unique about art now, and that's why I'm a big fan of this era. And the more and more is because you get experimentation. There are I like the tonal shift where you go from, what is it, into Keys of Marinus, the Aztecs? No.
Yeah, it goes Keys of Marinus, which is, a crazy B-movie serial, then the Aztecs, which is Shakespearean tragedy, and then the Censorites, which is a World War II movie in space, and then the Reign of Terror, which is a gritty historical.
Yeah, I like it. I've never been a fan of Keys of Marinus, but I respect what they were trying to do. Let's do a serial. It's a B-movie serial. Every episode's a different setting, a different adventure. There's peril. And they're and it's a mix of things. You got the Old West, which is the guy in the Ace Cave. It's some old trapper cabin. You know what I mean? And then you got a courtroom drama. You got other things. But yeah, I do like it. And they experiment because I'm a big supporter of Web Planet. Yes, does some of it fail? Technically, yes, but that's a lot of cojones to go and we're going to have people in bee suits, and it's a good story. I think it's a good story. It's just how over the top would it be in modern Who?
But it's a World War II prisoner of war story written by an actual veteran, and then it gets disguised a little bit because the costumes and the camera work is out there. But it's a World War II. It's Dalek 17 in space, and I don't like it. It's hard to sit through, especially part 6 when they're just going Zarbi, Zarbi. But you have to applaud. Here's the difference between the Hartnell and Troughton eras. You take Peter Bryant. You say, we're going to stick you in Lime Grove D, which is a studio the size of my dining room. And he goes, we can't work in here. We're going to have to make every serial a base under siege. So every story is going to have the same format. You're going to have one large set for the base with a computer in the middle. And then you'll have an alien spaceship in a corner of the studio where two guys in rubber masks are going to have long conversations without moving. Verity Lambert takes the exact same studio and goes, great. We're going to do a historical. Then we're going to do a spaceship. Then we're going to do a multi-planet epic. Then we're going to do Starlight 17 on the moon. Verity Lambert takes Lime Grove D and says, I'm going to do whatever I want. We're going to have a blast. Peter Bryant takes Lime Grove D. Oh, no, we can't do anything in the studio. Let's just do the same story over and over again.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. But this one is, I like the first Dalek story, but it is very, I don't know how to describe it because I don't. It's a B science fiction movie too in a way. You land on the alien planet. They have the cultures. You got the monsters in the the machine, the evil aliens and the good aliens on the planet or whatever. But this one, I think it's because of the location shooting that they're actually gone outside to do bits and pieces. The way I bash Terry Nation a lot because I don't think technically he's as good a writer as everybody fucking thinks. I think he's a really good idea man, and I think he's lucky he had good script editors. And he gets lazy later. I mean, I think Dalek in this one, he's reaching. These are great scripts. These are two Terry Nation scripts I really like. But
his reputation has to come from somewhere. I would argue that his reputation. I'm going to say that again. I would argue that his reputation comes from this story. This is his masterpiece.
Oh, it's much better than the first one. I do think the first one's a really good, one of the best scripts of the first season. I mean, I think it's a really good script. But I think I agree with you that this is almost perfect. I think there's very few flaws in it. It's not my favorite Hartnell Dalek story, but my favorite doesn't have to be the best. I like the chase. I really like the chase. And I forgive the fish suit people in the desert. I don't really care because I like bits and pieces of it. And I like Dalek Master playing. But I think Spooner and Whittaker write better dialogue.
But remember that Terry Nation did not know what the Daleks were going to look like. He was picturing, men in silver costumes. Mervyn Pinfield wanted to have the Daleks be men with silver-painted cardboard tubes on their arms and legs. It's Ray Cusick who makes the Daleks what they are.
Oh, yeah.
Terry Nation did not know that going into the first serial. When he comes back, remember he wrote 3 serials in the first production block. He does Daleks, then he does Marinus, then he comes back to do this. this is where he knows what the Daleks are and what they can achieve.
And he also knows he definitely knows what the abilities of what they can film too.
And he takes chances. There are a lot of surprises and reverses in this script. When you watch this, you assume that Dortmund is going to be the most important rebel character.
Oh, and he's gone in episode 3.
He's killed, and he's killed off in a tragedy. His bomb doesn't even work. So you keep waiting for that bomb to go off, and nothing ever happens. And he's out of the story halfway through.
Oh yeah, and I mean what I like about this one is you divide up the team, and they actually all get something equal to do. All 4 of them, you split them up 4 ways really. The Doctor's with Ian for a bit, and then he's with Susan. You're keeping someone with Hartnell, but he's always, but that's just kind of that. But, Barbara becomes a leader of the rebellion by episode 2, and Ian...
And they each get their own companion. Barbara gets Jenny, Susan gets David, Ian gets Larry and Madison, whose death is also a tragedy. So every character has their own little companion to go with them. It's a big, big cast. Much bigger than Daleks. But have you read... On the Blu-ray, on the Season 2 Blu-ray, you now have the production note file for Dalek Invasion of Earth. Have you read through that, man?
Well, no, because I've got the American one. There's nothing, we don't get the... I've never plugged it in to read the PDFs and stuff.
Read the BD-ROM, read the PDFs, read the production file. Well, you have the original script, so you can see how the farewell speech to Susan changes, because Hartnell had to adjust it in studio to fit his acuity. But the production note file, all the memos passed back and forth, this is a production team at war with the actors. Not only were they desperate to get rid of Susan, Verity Lambert was going to get rid of Barbara as well. This was a good chance this could have been Barbara's last story. And then Verity Lambert has an angry series of memos because the cast were leaving early on Thursday afternoon. And she was like, no, they have to be here the whole day. Don't let the cast take extra time on Thursday. We need them for rehearsal or what have you. So it's fascinating to read her management style. I mean, she was very, very, very strict, ran a very tight ship.
Well, you have to. I mean, that's the thing about being a producer, especially in the early days of television, because, this is still early days. They've had TV, and the BBC has had regular television at this point for about at least 10 years more.
And a woman in her late 20s running a serial that's getting 13 million viewers a week.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, they hit their stride. What's after this one?
After this, they go on vacation, and then they come back with Maureen O'Brien as the new number 4 cast member.
Oh, The Rescue.
And they film The Rescue.
Wow, that's a good one, too. But there's been a pause. They've all had a break. I think this one, rewatching it yesterday, as I went from episode to episode, because I really don't ever watch... This is so sad, that is, because I don't think I've ever watched a lot of this even though I'm watching it in episode format, I'm still watching it straight through, or big chunks of it. So, but I could see the difference in all the chapters. Each episode was different, even though there might be overlap, but there was a journey. Everybody gets separated, and they all start on a journey to the exact same place without knowing it, and everybody it's just so perfectly paced, and the guest cast is so good. The guy on the saucer with Ian and the Doctor, and then his next traveling companion. And this is a dark one. There's a lot. There's 2 women with Jenny and Barbara, the 2 women who do the sewing and they turn him in.
That's an incredibly uncompromising scene. And then the old woman. In the movie version of this, it's Eileen Way, who had been in Unearthly Child and later came back in Creature from the Pit. Eileen Way plays the older woman in the movie. It's somebody else on TV. But they sell Barbara and Jenny for a bag of oranges, not aware that these 2 people are on an important mission. And the woman goes, oh, well, they would have been captured anyway. That's the way she rationalizes it for herself. It's a very World War II collaborator approach. That's what they are.
Yeah, and it's 20 years after the war, and it's still very visceral, because that is written from... that is such a dark scene. And I can't think of many darker scenes in classic Who.
And Dortmund's death is pretty dark. Larry Madison's death is pretty dark. And then Craddock. Craddock is a friend of the Doctor and Ian in Part 2, helps them escape from the cell. And then he immediately is caught on Robotom. When he comes back, he's a Robo-Man, and he's lost all of his identity. Not to mention, the very first thing you see in this episode is a Robo-Man committing suicide in front of a sign saying it is forbidden to dump bodies in the river.
Yeah.
We are a long way from Keys and Marin is here.
Yeah, I mean, and the sets are great. I mean, that set underneath the fire escape or whatever falls on top of the TARDIS is spot on. You know, the warehouse is good. The spaceship is freaking great. The little back alley landing pad. I mean, you can tell when they're in the studio at times, but there are times where I don't see it.
In episode, remember this is Richard Martin directing. Richard Martin gets criticized by people because of the chase and the web planet, but if you look at the work he does here, there is, number one, there is a live in studio flashback sequence in episode 2 with a flying saucer, and then there is the attack on the Dalek saucer that is done live in studio, and it's incredibly complex. And the scene with the guy who tries to run away and gets exterminated by the Daleks, that's another incredible scene. And Richard Martin just knocks it out of the park here, his first story out.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I never understood the Richard Martin bashing, because I think sometimes, you know, they gave him the web planet. That's how much of what's wrong with that is his. It's like, I got people in bee suits and ant suits, you know.
And there's a lot of visual flubs. There's a lot of gaffes in the chase, some of which have been cleaned up for the DVD. But actors come in too early. A Dalek is seen before they materialize.
Is that the one where there's a dude down the hallway cutting across the hallway, the tech, the crew member?
In the fish person sequence, you can see the fish person fall, and then you can see him crawling off camera to hit his next mark.
No, this was a dude who was on the wrong side of the hallway, back in the back of the shot.
That was Keys of Marin.
Okay, that's the one I'm thinking about, where you can just see the dude go, fuck, they can't see me. It's like, well, now in the year 2000 we can, because our TV screens are giant.
No, one of the Daleks attacking the Doctor in episode 5 of The Chase is BBC Camera 5.
Oh my God. I'll have to pay more attention on the Blu-rays, because sometimes I'm like going, with the joy of being able to watch this digitally remastered on a Blu-ray on a big TV, is sometimes, this was originally seen on like a 10-inch screen across the room. So
in 405 line broadcast. This was not meant to be seen the way we're seeing it, but adjusting for the studio size and the budget and the year, Richard Martin does stunning work.
I think there's no fluff in this. I think if anything where I get a little distracted is the elevator sequence toward the end. The prop piece is that's like the weakest of all the sets. But I like it. I think because I like the old movie format. I like all that stuff. I think it works, and I don't think there's a bad performance in it. You know, across the board, everybody. Bernard Kay's in it, and that takes everybody else up a level, I think.
He keeps coming back. He's pretty much in every season of Doctor Who between 1 and 7. In season 2, he comes back for the Crusade. You see him again in Faceless Ones. You see him again in Colony in Space. He was like their number one. He was the number one guest star for a while.
Yeah, between him and Philip Maddock are my favorite too.
Yeah, and Philip Maddock was in the movie version of this, playing the black market guy, not in the TV serial.
Yeah, and I like him in that. I really like that. Is those and I didn't really pay attention to the movies. I'd seen them years ago, and then during the pandemic, I bought the Blu-rays, so I went and really watched them. They're beautiful. They're beautifully remastered, and I'm a bigger fan of VistaVision. Or the English version of VistaVision over Technicolor, because there's an unnatural brightness to it, but I like it. It makes everything pop, and it's really pretty. But this one works, because I do prefer this over the original Dalek story, and I'm the same way with the movies. I think the second movie is way better than the first movie.
The second movie is slapstick. Bernard Cribbins has a long sequence where he's trying to blend in as a Robo-Man and is marching out of step. So they take a lot of the horror from the TV serial and turn it into a slapstick comedy for the movie. So very different tone. The first time I saw the movie, I'm like, what is this? It took me a while to appreciate it.
Well, it's written for, a Sunday. It's the movie theaters. I mean, I don't know what it was like over there, but we had Hayes Commission and other whatever silliness we had on whatever it was called on television. So you would have to. There's stuff that I'm surprised, like the the old women, the collaborator scene, and the really dark stuff. I'm surprised some of that didn't get edited, but like Australia, where anything with blood they cut out.
Yeah.
Would that have been too dark for an American television show? Because they, everything had to be positive and wrap up in a bow. But I just think this one works so well. The Daleks are good. You've got more of them. I think in some ways, it's an easier allegory for the war to understand compared to Dalek in this one. Because, Nation's still doing the same thing about the oppressors, the invaders. It's not that far off from another Nazi allegory. It's more war, it's more generic, maybe, I guess. I don't know.
But he has a lot more confidence in his storytelling abilities. If you
Yeah.
watch these as a movie format, they were not meant to be a movie format. Daleks works better as a movie because parts 2, 3, and 4 all take place in the same cell. You have a very long stretch of time in the first serial where they're just sitting in a room talking for 3 consecutive weeks.
Oh, yeah.
This is a shorter serial, 6 weeks instead of 7, and there's a different location and set of sets for each of the 6
Yeah.
weeks. So episode 1 is the Riverside, episode 2 is the Flying Saucer, episode 3 is the incredible location footage, Westminster Bridge, Trafalgar Square. That was all guerrilla-style shooting. They didn't have permits for it. They had never tried to do that before.
They
And
do a
it's
really
amazing.
good job of They do a really good job of it for not doing it before.
And they slapped Dalek graffiti on Nelson's column. They slapped Dalek graffiti on Westminster Bridge on the embankment. They have the characters, including the wheelchair, going up and down the stairs. And then you have the cave sequence. You have the black market sequence. You have the old women in the house selling Barbara and Jenny for oranges. And then you have never seen so many extras at one time on screen on this show before. If you're
Oh,
watching
the mine
sequence.
scene?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I was like going, how much did that cost them? Sorry, one of my cats is destroying shit.
Yeah, I've got Smudge jumping back and forth over my laptop, so any noise you hear on my track is Smudge bouncing back and forth, yelling at Ginger.
Oh, my work walkie-talkie. Bandit knocked it over. I had to log in and remote in for a little while this last weekend. But I like everything about it. I like the pacing. I like the setting. I like that it picks a speed. Richard Martin picks a speed. And I don't, you know what I mean? That it is so tightly written and edited is that it's allowed to move at a certain pace continuously from episode to episode.
And it's David Whittaker's final job as script editor. I'm sure he added a lot of value to this as well.
Yeah, well, I still think of the old school script editors, if he's not in your top 3, you're wrong. He's as important as any other. I think he's the unsung hero of the creation of the show. We talk about other script editors like, oh, it's Barry Letts, Terrence Dicks era, it's the Hinchcliffe Holmes era, it's Andrew Cartmell's era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we don't talk about we talk about Verity, which we should, as the most important producer in Who history, because all the things you said that should have been a handicap in that time for her. She was a woman. She was 28. She created one of the longest-lasting television shows. Important, you know what I mean? But Whittaker is as important as shaping it as she is.
Oh, absolutely agreed.
I think that it's why when he's replaced by Dennis Spooner, who I think is a really good script editor, you don't see it. The show really doesn't. I don't think it sees its first dip until you get to Innes Lloyd as a producer, really causing issues where he's firing people left and right, and it's changing. And then
I'm going to be doing an episode of my show, probably in a few months, a bonus episode, not a novelization episode, covering production season 3. you and Jeff on Runcible Report did TV Season 3, which goes from Galaxy 4 through War Machines. But if you look at Production Season 3, which is Mythmakers through the Smugglers, you have two producers. You have John Wiles, who starts and then quits halfway through, becomes Innes Lloyd. You have Donald Tosh, the script editor. He quits at the same time as Wiles. He gets replaced by Jerry Davis. Hartnell gets sidelined increasingly more throughout the season and basically is fired at the end of Season 3, end of the Smugglers, and only comes back for a 3-week guest stint in the 4-week 10th Planet. Peter Purvis goes through there are 7 companions in Production Season 3, starting with Stephen and Vicky in Mythmakers and going through Ben and Polly in Smugglers. Peter Purvis has 4 female companions. He goes from Vicky to Katarina to Sarah Kingdom to Dodo, and then Dodo is fired without warning in the middle of War Machines. Season 3 is made up of great stories. Season 3 is full of bangers, but if you just cover the production end of things, the way it starts and the way it finishes, it is an incredible story to be told. And that, of course, takes us away from David Whittaker. Coming back to Adventure in Space and Time, the Mark Gatiss docudrama, David Whittaker isn't even in it. They gave his role to Mervyn Pinfield to give I forget the actor's name. He was in Frontios too, Jeff Rawl, I want to say. But he plays an amalgam of Mervyn Pinfield and David Whittaker, and he's very good. But it sort of inadvertently minimizes what Whittaker did. So when Simon Gurrier's book comes out, and I saw Simon Gurrier at Galley 1 in February, he was talking about the research process of the book, and David Whittaker had been an actor. All of David Whittaker's friends show up in Season 1 as guest stars. In fact, the woman who plays the female character in Unearthly Child, was the maid of honor at Whittaker's wedding.
Yeah.
So that book is really going to knock our socks off.
I'm looking forward to it. I forgot he was doing that. I'd heard about that and forgot about it. And my favorite thing in that Season 2 box set was the David Whittaker documentary.
Uh-huh. And you can actually see Althea Charlton as maid of honor in footage of the wedding, although he hadn't identified her yet. So when the book comes out, there'll be even more data.
It's how much he shapes this season, and, it's just, this serial, it just works so well. I mean, I really do like it. I joked with Jason, though, I had seen it so many times, I really didn't need to refresh my memory for it, really, that much. Because, it's one of the first Hartnell, and I saw it I didn't see it in episode form till the VHS came out. I saw it as one of those terribly edited together omnibuses. It was it was choppy that way because it wasn't made to be edited together, so some of the edits are a little jarring.
Yeah, the cliffhangers get sort of blunted over. I saw this for the first time July 27th, 1985, my very first Doctor Who convention at the now defunct Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan. That was on East 45th Street and Madison Avenue. It was a victim of the pandemic, so it stayed open for another 35 years after I was there for the con. But it was my first convention. I bought like 6 novelizations that day in the dealer room. I got the 10th Planet, I got the War Games, I got Keys of Marinus, which I read in the lobby. But they had just got the Hartnell and Troughton package for PBS.
Okay, yeah.
So they showed that day the movie format version of Dalek Invasion of Earth, which is 2.5 hours, and then the movie format version of Seeds of Death. Bearing in mind I'm 11 going on 12, my father took me home after we sat through Dalek Invasion of Earth, but I'm sitting in there in the ballroom, only person there probably under 18, watching the movie format version, which they had specially made 1985 style video credits with the 1985 copyright date, which confused me. They didn't use the actual episode 6 credits for the omnibus. But I was sitting there watching it, and I was just blown. I was just sitting there in absolute mesmerized awe because I'd never seen a Hartnell before. Reading the books, I thought that Ian would have had a much deeper voice as an action hero. Was not counting on William Russell having a voice as high-pitched as mine. But other than that, I loved every second. And my father was sitting there miserable and hated it. And that's why we left early and didn't stick around for Seeds of Death.
Oh, my God. Some of them work. I mean, some of them work as a movie format. This one works a little better than others. It's just how they were, how lazy. Who was it? Yeah, forget who was doing it one time. BBC was out licensing it itself by then, wasn't they? Yeah. It wasn't, because I remember for first Doctor we got was Lionheart and then BBC, then Time Warner.
Yeah, I think Time Warner was first. They had Howard Da Silva hired on.
No, that's Lionheart.
That was Lionheart? Okay,
That's
I thought
that's-
Lionheart came later.
Well, maybe it is flipped. No, it is flipped. You're right. It's Time Warner, and then it's Lionheart after that.
Because my PBS originally got the Lionheart package, so I had the distinctive Lionheart fanfare at the end of every episode, and then they switched over to Time Warner, so I got to see the Howard Da Silva intros a little bit later on.
Yeah, which were weird. I
And
wish
if you
I could
watch-
find good copies of them.
If you watch the movie format of Underworld, which probably no longer exists anywhere, but the movie format actually retained some of the Howard Da Silva narration when they did the cliffhanger edit from 2 to 3.
I remember
That's a
that.
very
That's
awful
that was the one that was on PBS and in Maryland, and so it was on every copy I had of it for the first 15 or 20 years I was following. When did the VHS start coming out? The 90s?
Late 80s, early 90s. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was living in Maryland. I was an undergrad at Baltimore, so I saw Underworld movie format on MPT, Maryland Public Television. That's how I saw that same thing that you did.
Yeah. But this one it works for. What since you do the Doctor Who literature and you've got your handy dandy Invasion of Earth novel, what are the differences?
So this was episode 30 of Doctor Who literature, and I had John Peel as my guest. And I was hoping that John Peel would have had access to the original Terry Nation scripts, because he inherited a lot of Terry Nation scripts when Terry Nation passed away. That he does not have the original Terry Nation drafts for this story, but he does have the original copy of the Unearthly Child script, which was given to Terry as a example of what to write. So the two biggest changes in the book, Dortmund's death is very different from what happens on television. I don't know if this is Terrence Dix looking at the original script, or if it's Terrence Dix changing what Terry Nation wrote. And John Peel didn't know the answer to this either. But I'll say that again. Terrence Dix gives Dortmund a much happier ending. This is page 74. The group of Daleks outside the museum's main door seemed frozen in astonishment as Dortmund appeared in the doorway. To be defied and attacked was a new experience for them, and they hesitated, fearing some trap. Dortmund wheeled himself forward, straight at the nearest Dalek. When he was close enough, he hurled the entire satchel of grenades. There was a shattering explosion and a sheet of flame. The corner of the building collapsed, and Dortmund and his Dalek enemy disappeared beneath the rubble. That's page 74 of the novelization. As far as John and I can figure out, this is Terrence Dix intentionally changing Terry Nation scripts to give Dortmund a happier ending, to make it a little more emotionally satisfying. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer Dortmund dying futilely with the bomb not going off? Or do you prefer him dying in a blaze of glory as a suicide bomber with the bombs going off and taking a bunch of Daleks out with him?
The futility, because you need them to get the victories later. I think this works because they're losing. It's because it's them being unsuccessful in what they want to do is what causes everybody to start their journey toward Bedfordshire. You know what I mean? Is the Doctor and Ian are battling the spaceship. The raid on that doesn't go right. The people get found out. Everything pushes them toward their end result in Bedfordshire.
Right.
Why am I leaving London? You have to motivate your main characters to go further away from the TARDIS when all they initially want is some welding equipment so they can leave.
Right.
That is what they went looking for, and they end up becoming members of the Underground.
And the scene with Barbara trying to bamboozle the Daleks with a fake history lesson is hilarious. I mean, Jacqueline Hill is incredible.
She's so good in this. She is so good. I don't understand. What was the logic in her leaving after this one?
I don't think they felt the character was working. Maybe they had some problems with the actress. But if you read the Blu-ray, there are memos where they say, we're thinking about getting rid of her and not bringing her back. They don't exactly say why in the memo. It's a liability issue. But there was a chance that she would have been gone after this story. Luckily, we got her for much longer than we did.
No, because I still think of the three originals, she is... I like all three of them. Any problem I have with Susan as a character is on the writers and the producers, and it's not on Carol Ann Ford. But I think Barbara is ahead of the curve, and I think the further you get away from Barbara, and until you get to maybe Ace and Modern Who, the agency of female characters gets small, and it goes up and down. Some are more so, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Barbara takes no prisoners from the beginning. She doesn't, she holds her own with the Doctor and Ian. She corrects them both. She's the smartest one in the room, always.
And then there are some changes as well in the Terrence Dicks version from the Doctor's farewell to Susan. So I have... Oh, here we go. I found my snapshot. This is from the Dalek Invasion of Earth Blu-ray production note. You can see it on the BD-ROM. This is a memo written by Verity. If we are to lose any members of the cast, and our present thinking is that we may well drop the Jackie Hill character altogether and replace Carol Ann Ford with another younger girl, this must be decided upon in the time so that we can write... I'll say that again. This must be decided upon in time so that we can write into the Return of the Dalek serial, the last in the first year's program, the scenes which will make these changes work from then on. The serial is at present being written by Terry Nation, and he is naturally anxious for an early decision. Now I'm going to read you the two different versions of the farewell to Susan. There's one version in the camera script, and there's another version in the novelization. So this is the camera script. You're still my granddaughter, and you always will be, but now you're a woman too. I want you to belong somewhere and have roots of your own. With David, you will be able to find these roots and live normally as a woman should do. My dear, believe me, your future is with David and not with a silly old buffer like me. Work hard, both of you. Be gentle with her, David, and show her that life on Earth with love and understanding can be a great adventure. Yes, I'll come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I was not mistaken. And remember, love is the most precious jewel of all. So that's the monologue that David Whittaker writes. Hartnell delivers it differently in studio. In the novelization, page 141. All these years, I've been taking care of you. And all the time, you really felt you were taking care of me. That's a pretty interesting change.
Yeah.
Susan goes, I belong with you. He goes, not anymore, Susan. Your future is with young David, not with an old buffer like me. Look after her, David, my boy. Be kind. Work hard, both of you. You'll find that life on Earth can be an adventure, too. Now then, both of you, no regrets, and look to the future. Remember, both of you loves the thing. That's what really counts. Goodbye. One day I'll come back. One day. Goodbye. So David Whittaker gives you the full version. Hartnell delivers most of it with a couple of interesting edits that I think are more memorable. And then in the novelization, Terrence Dicks goes off script entirely. I think Hartnell's delivery of that is the best version of the three.
Yeah.
And I just got my 5 Doctors episode out this morning on Doctor Who Literature, so I was playing that a lot in the edit. So I think Hartnell's delivery is my favorite.
Because he adds, don't go forward in all your beliefs as I have done in mine. That's a nice add. I do like the old thing. I do like that intro, though, in the book, where all along I thought I was taking care of you, but you were taking care of me. That's a good sentiment to say. And I think the novelization, having not I haven't read that book in 40 years, or whenever I went to college, so that would have been 40 years ago this year, probably, since I've read that. Yeah, that I don't remember it, but it's really, sorry, Uncle Terrence, but that's not, the other one's better. I like you think Hartnell, he puts the final polish on it with this performance, because it's also one of his better moments as an actor. I mean, he has a lot of good moments as a Doctor. He is really acting his ass off. But there's certain times where, certain scenes that to me, it sings, where he really is nailing it. And I think he nails it in that farewell. Because I remember seeing it in the 5 Doctors for the first time and going, what? It wasn't what I hadn't seen a first Doctor story except 3. I probably hadn't even seen 3 Doctors yet.
When David Whittaker writes, prove to me that I am not mistaken, he's talking about his decision to let Susan go. Prove to me that I am not mistaken in setting you up with David. Yeah. The way that Hartnell changes it, prove to me that I am not mistaken in my beliefs. That's a much more philosophical. It's a deeper line when you add those words, mistaken in mine.
Yeah. It shows a little more self-awareness of the Doctor and stuff like that. I do prefer the TV one, but the book one, that surprised me how different it was.
it's not as memorable if Hartnell had delivered it the way that Terrence Dix wrote it, and bearing in mind Hartnell had already passed away by the time Terrence writes his novelization. I don't know if it hits the same way. I really don't.
No, I think he takes the sting out of it. There has to be a little bit of melancholy in it. It's a farewell. And he takes it all out. Like, it just turns into a Disney ending where,
The same way he takes the sting out of Dortmund's death. He's writing possibly for a younger audience and wants to
he's right.
blunt the impact.
This would have been, what were the age target for Target books? Like 10 to 7 to 12 or something?
I would say 8 to 12. I've got my 6th edition on the back says children fiction, so this was being specifically marketed to kids.
Yeah,
so
you really can't. You got to kind of tidy it up at that point.
But other than that, it's one of the longest targets of the era. It ends on page 142, which is about as long as the targets went in the late 70s and early to mid 80s. And Terrence puts a lot of great descriptive power into it. I break it down on episode 30 of my podcast. I won't go into the whole speech here, obviously, but it's a really good book, apart from those 2 significant changes that I mentioned.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to check that out. I've got my homework for the next 2 times, so got to get started. Well, I mean, overall, I like this one. It's sometimes I go into these where I watch it, and I've got such a lot of praise for it. I don't feel like I'm actually talking as much about it. I'm glad you were here and have the more detailed take, because I didn't even read my any of my reference material. I just kind of watched it and wanted to because I thought I would have to reabsorb a lot of it. It had been a while since I'd watched it. It had been several years. Maybe, I don't think I'd seen it before I watched it when I got this Blu-ray set. I don't think I'd watched it since me and Vic since before me and Vic, it may have been 4 or 5 years. Because I can't remember when I started my last rewatch. But I stopped at one point for like 18 months. I've been a pause again because all these Blu-ray sets and other things to do, so I haven't really kept going. Also, I was getting near, I haven't watched a lot of New Who in a while. Only if it's actually new for the last like 2 years. If I'm going to rewatch it, it's been all O2. So, but I enjoyed this one. What's your final take?
I can tell you the last 2 times that I watched it. I've got my 500-year diary here. When I tried to do the pilgrimage in 2013, I kept all my notes in this 500-year diary.
Uh-huh.
So I'm looking at the notes that I wrote now more than 10 years ago. Something else. Hartnell standing up to the Daleks by the river in episode 2, his character was not doing that sort of heroic thing in the broadcast season 1. So this is a change for the Hartnell character as well. He's suddenly become the main character of the show rather than the antagonist.
Well, I think ending it on Reign of Terror and that conversation they have at the end, that we're in this together, that's a good ending because he has changed. What I like about Hartnell era is he changes from Unearthly Child to Reign of Terror. He changes when Susan leaves. Not only does the Doctor change, but William Hartnell's performance is tweaked by the input of having Maureen O'Brien on the set, because their relationship is just so special, and you could tell it's because of the actors have a special relationship, and it really shows with Vicky and Hartnell's character, the First Doctor, that there is a more natural grandfather relationship. Because it's more real. I mean, I think he cared for Carol Ann Ford deeply, but, we all know that. But there's just a chemistry. There's a cinematic chemistry that is just mind-boggling. Which in later Doctor Who, you really don't get. You may get a moment when a companion leaves, and then it's all fine and dandy the next episode, even if it's a good or a bad exit. And this being the first exit, I think this is one of the better exits.
And considering how unsentimental they were about getting rid of Carol Ann Ford, they could have given her the dodo treatment. They could have just sent her off to the mines in episode 4, and then have her write a note in episode 6. Sorry, staying behind, LOLs. So it's interesting they gave her this enormous 10-minute departure sequence when it was an actor they didn't want on the show anymore. It could have been much worse.
Yeah, but I think they get it. I think you can tell which production teams think about their audience. Yeah. That's letting your audience know. One, it's nice to the actor. I've just given you 18 months of my fucking life. Give me a goodbye, you prick. But it's also, our audience wants oh, they're not going to miss him. They're going to have a new companion they're going to like next week. Now, don't assume that. Don't assume what your audience is thinking. And I think they play to the audience, and in a good way. It's like you needed to give her a good farewell. It's earned. It's earned in this story, because I think the love affair with David is, I buy it. It's better than Leela and Andred. Like, really? You guys? Okay.
It's a very physical relationship. They're actually making out on camera. It's telegraphed as early as episode 1, where Susan says that things can't change. Things have to stay the same, which of course means her life is about to be upended.
Yeah.
And there's this really amazing Hartnell character beat where he is suspicious of David, and then David defers to him as the senior man in the party, and all of a sudden the Doctor is David's best friend.
Well, I think it's also you see the Doctor thinking about, you see him thinking about Susan needs to leave in episode 3.
Yeah.
It's not broadcast. You get to see an observation. You get that the Doctor, while watching them interact, goes, you can almost see the moment where he decides that she is in love with him, and she is not going to make the right decision.
Yeah.
And the right decision is this young man. This is why she's talking about him. And it's a great moment. And it's the subtlety of Hartnell as an actor that it's just, he knows what he's doing. He's playing for the moment. The moment is there. It's earned, and it works. And I think you get a lot of those in this one. I think Barbara and Jenny performance is really good. The chemistry with them. They got a lot of that's luck, a lot of it's skill. I think this one just fires on all cylinders and everything just clicks. You think this is your favorite Hartnell Dalek story?
It's not my favorite Hartnell, period, full stop. I think the Gunfighters is I can watch the Gunfighters over and over and over and over again and never ever get tired of it. I think pound for pound, though, it is the best, as opposed to favorite, Hartnell serial. I think it's a little better than the Daleks. It's not as funny as The Chase, but it has a little more structural integrity. And Dalek's Master Plan is phenomenal, but there are bits in Dalek Master Plan that don't work as well as others, which happens in a 12-week serial.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think
it.
Pound for pound, this is the best.
That one's really 2 Dalek stories with a monk story in the middle.
Yeah, it's surprisingly the 3-episode monk story, episodes 8, 9, and 10 of Master Plan, and surprisingly, when you're watching it straight through, it doesn't work as well as the earlier and later bits of Master Plan. It's more of a distraction, and they kind of burn off ancient Egypt as a period setting for comedy rather than exploring it on its own as its own independent story.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work out. You just like, come on, get back to Kemble, get to the Daleks. This comedy business is kind of a distraction for me.
Well, I'm hoping with the Disney money and all the extra money that's going into, and Davies is going to have more money to market and do spin-offs, that they do some more. They don't have to be any higher end than they've already done animation. You know what I mean? But let's just get it done. Let's get over the hump, gentlemen. There's not much more to do. I don't think you need to animate the 2 episodes of Underwater Menace. I don't see any need for that. I thought the Crusade Telesnap worked fine in the Crusade. It was fine.
For Dalek's Master Plan, I want the animation.
Yeah,
there's
I do
9
too.
episodes missing. One of them is the Christmas episode with Bing Crosby, but there's 8 other Dalek episodes that are missing. I would love to see those again in animation form.
Yeah, I think you do those. I think you do Marco Polo and go glorious with the color and let the animators go all over the place. Even if they have to do it different, do a black and white version that is shot different. Just do it. They could do it. They could finish it up.
Yeah.
It would be nice. Because making Leslie sit through next episode, folks. After this, Leslie is covering Fury of the Deep. She's watched a few episodes already. I've told her she had to watch the color ones and then the telesnap, so she had an idea what it would have looked like in real.
Oh wow.
So, but that's fun. All right, Jason, go on. Talk about where everybody can see you on the interwebs.
So I am on Twitter at Doctor Who Novels, Dr. Novels. I am on email at Doctor Who Literature, drwholiterature@gmail.com. And the Doctor Who Literature podcast is podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/Doctor Who Lit, DOCTOR Who Lit. We're recording this on the Sunday. I just released first episode of The Five Doctors. My guest is James Courray Smith, who has an incredible Substack called Psychic Paper, covering the history of Doctor Who. And he also has written several of the Black Archives. Next week, I'm doing my second episode on The Five Doctors. My guest is Elizabeth Morton, who is married to Peter Davison and is the mother-in-law of David Tennant. That's already been recorded.
Oh, that's cool.
And then my third episode, I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm planning on having Adam Christopher, who has written a best-selling Star Wars novel, has written a Stranger Things novel that I'm reading right now, Darkness on the Edge of Town, set in New York City in 1977. The week of the blackout in July. Pretty iconic moment in New York history. And he got started as a New Zealand-based Doctor Who fan, so we're going to have a lot to talk about. That's the next
cool.
3 weeks of my show.
Wow, that's good. Those are 3 gets.
And I'll plug Eliza Morton's novel, The Orphans from Liverpool Lane. It's her latest Liverpool book, just came out. Not science fiction, but it takes place during and after the war. It's a family of 4 whose lives are upended by World War II. The father is a prisoner of war, and the 2 daughters end up becoming what they call orphans of the living, and they're taken into custody of the nearest convent while their mother is still alive and working a manual labor job to help with the war effort. It's, again, not sci-fi, but it's pretty harrowing. It's very well told. So I'm talking to her about that book, and then, of course, about what it's like to be a Doctor Who family member as well, and who her favorite Doctor is. The answer will surprise you.
That guy gets no love in his own house, I have a feeling. All right, folks. Well, that's it for this week. Check out Jason's podcast. It's always fun having him on. He will be back for Hand of Fear.
Very excited for Sarah Jane's departure. Bring your tissues. Bring your handkerchief. That's going to be a tearjerker.
I do, and it's one I feel like I get grief for liking, not because of the farewell. It's a good farewell moment, but I do like that story too, with all its. I just enjoy it. That's an era of Doctor Who that I'm over familiar with it because I saw it so much as a kid. I do like it every time I see it. So, folks, until then, as always, keep listening. We'll be here every 2 weeks with a new guest, and we look forward to seeing you somewhere in time